Hi students, I'm just starting to record this lecture on plant diseases today. This is actually the 20th of November. Classes are canceled for today. I'm going to go ahead and record this lecture because there is supposed to be more freezing rain tonight, and I do want to have the quiz on the Monday we get back. So I want to make sure I go through the last lecture, and please remember to go through the quiz at the end of the book, which is the one we're going to have on the Monday we get back. So you'll have the labels with Selecto 75 WSP and the Plant Guard 50. And there are 47 questions on that quiz at the end of the chapter, your practice test. Okay, so if we look at where we start talking about diseases here, since we just finished with insects, and that starts on page 23 in your textbook. And there's a lot of different things that we could talk about with a plant disease, and I've got a couple as I'm starting out here. The main thing is to characterize a plant disease is pretty difficult, and if you look at the definition that they actually give you on page 23, it's a condition in which a plant varies in some way from a healthy plant in either structure or function. So the disease could have shorter branches, as they talk here, could have dots on it. It could not produce flowers, it might not produce fruit, but there's a lot of different things that can make that plant look like it's diseased. And also on page 23, if you're looking at it, you'll see that it shows you some of the different diseases: leaf spots, twig blight, shoot blight, mildew, wilt. You could get a crown gall, which is at the crown of the plant below the surface. You could get the roots having problems. So there's a lot of different things that can cause a possible injury to the plant. So if we start out looking at the causes of plant disease, we have both living, which is abiotic, and non-living agents, which is abiotic, that can cause diseases. So we're going to start out with a non-living cause of plant diseases, or abiotic. So this is going to be caused by a physical or chemical component in the environment that can be harmful to plant growth. Okay, so whatever this is, this abiotic disease doesn't spread from plant to plant because it's a non-living entity, because we already said it could be a physical environment, you know, where it froze or something like that, or it got really drought stressed. And it lists all of these. It's running off the screen here, but it's also on page 24 of your text. So you've got temperature extremes, so we got winter kill, frost damage could be heat, soil moisture. Too much moisture could cause pythium. You get root rot, that's what another word for pythium is, root rot. Low amount of moisture would be wilt. We can get reduced oxygen levels in the soils. We can get nutrient deficiencies or some type of imbalance. We could get improper application of chemicals, which would cause leaf spots, dieback, some type of growth abnormality. And then we could actually have what we see here at the very bottom. Let's see if I can drag this down just a little bit, so that we have, and that's fine. We get lightning, hail, wind, pollutants. Because basically we can actually have ozone when you get into higher temperatures and a lot of moisture, and if you have ozone, you can actually get spots on the leaves from the ozone on the leaves. Some of my abiotic diseases can be corrected, some of them can't, so they may live with those leaf spots on their leaves for the rest of that particular plant's life. So don't forget about these when you start looking at plants, because abiotics can cause difficulties and people don't see them. Okay, when we think of plant diseases, probably the most common thing we're going to look at is biotic, and that means I'm going to have a pathogen that's going to cause this disease. So it's a living organism capable of causing disease in any particular host species. So it all depends on what crop you're looking at. Okay, these biotic pathogens are parasites, which means they're going to grow and reproduce only on living plant tissues. Okay, so that means they're a parasite. Okay, Also, you may have pathogens that are also not only going to live as a parasite, but you can get some of the disease organisms that actually live on dead material as well, and those would be known as saprophytes, saprophytes, and that's on the top of the right-hand column on page 24. Okay, so depending on how the organism grows will depend on whether it can live on dead tissue or not. And when we look at these organisms, or the pathogens, we divide them into major groups. And we're actually going to be looking at five major groups. So we got fungi, bacteria, mycoplasma-like organisms, viruses, and nematodes. So they throw nematodes in with diseases. So you'll find them in the insect control manual. Okay, we can go back and I suggest on this lecture, I'm just going through that. We need to go back through, I would look more at what each different organism does, because you're going to want to understand that. And I will probably do another lecture on that as well. If we're open tomorrow, I will go ahead and put up that lecture as well. If not, I'll just go ahead and go back through those. But we're going to move, because the more in detail for each one of these groups that I went through, the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses, mycoplasmas, and the nematodes, those are all on page 24 to 25. Okay, but the main thing you want to do is look at the disease triangle. And that's going to tell you you're going to have three things present for a disease to actually develop. And you're going to need a host plant. So if I was looking at something like turf grasses that I work with, I'm going to have a grass. If you're growing wheat, if you're growing barley, or if you're growing soybeans, corn, whatever, you need a type of plant that's affected by that particular disease or pathogen. Okay, the other thing you have to put in there, well, let's just finish talking about the host plant, sorry, is that there are going to be some cultivars of species that you're going to be working with. They're going to be resistant to this disease. So that's what you would like to do, so you don't have to put out any fungicides. Okay, so if we go on to the next part of the disease triangle, we've got a host, now we've got a pathogen. Okay, so as we look at the pathogen, this is my disease-causing organism. Okay, so I could be any of the groups I talked about, a fungus, a bacteria, a virus, or a non-living agent. It could be parasitic or non-parasitic, but it's going to be a pathogen that will actually affect this host plant. Okay, so that's 2 out of 3. All right, I don't get infection of a disease until I get all 3 of these points of the triangle. So the last one is environment. Okay, so environmental conditions have to favor the development of the disease. So I need the host plant, I need the pathogen, and I need the environment to be able to have this plant infected. Okay, so environment's going to include temperature, humidity, maybe wind, maybe lack of wind, time of year, moisture content. There's going to be a particular time when the plant will be more susceptible. Okay, so you're going to need all 3 of those to get a plant infected. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is look at diagnosis of diseases. And again, in the other lecture, I'm going to go back through and talk about how plants get infected and the different modes of dissemination of molecules, or I should say molecules, of the spores of fungi, and how bacteria move, and viruses. So we'll do a little bit more of that in the second lecture here. But for today, I'm just going to look at the symptoms and signs. And this is discussed on page 28. Okay, so if we look at that, symptom would be something that's any detectable change in the plant itself. Okay, so it changes color or shape. So one of the first things you're going to look at is the actual necrosis or death of plant parts. And usually they're going to become discolored. They may start out yellow and then get more yellow tan and then go really tan and then go brown and then go black. Okay, so that's necrosis. We can actually see another symptom would be actually looking at tissue discoloration. So apart from the death of the plant, you can actually have no chlorophyll being developed. Again, so you've got a normal plant leaf might be green, and this one will be yellow because it's just not producing any chlorophyll. And sometimes you can actually get a red discoloration with that. Okay, the third thing we look for is actually overdevelopment of tissue. So you might have an increase in cell division. So you can have abnormally, or I should say abnormal enlargements of cells. This is very common in like a crown gall, club root, leaf curls. So that basically the auxins will make the cells grow larger and cause a disformation. And it could affect the actual production of crop output. Okay, and then we can actually get a stunting or dwarfing of plants or an underdevelopment of tissue from decreased cell division or enlargement, also as a symptom of a disease problem. And then the last symptom I'm going to talk about is the wilt. And basically that's when I lose water in the plant, so the plant isn't going to be standing upright as well. It's going to be bending over, drooping plant parts. They talk about here, they say wilt is a loss of rigidity. So they're not going to have enough water transport to the upper portions of the plant. It could be due to low soil moisture. I might have dead roots, a dead stem. I could have a pathogen blocking the water transport system, plugging the plant's conductive tissues. Okay, it could be blocking both the xylem and the phloem. Okay, but that's what I would expect to see if a plant is wilting. Okay, so I see we skipped over something here. And one of the things that was skipped in the slides, and maybe I've put it later in the slides and got it out of order, but I didn't see anything about signs. And signs of plant disease are actually the organism causing the problem. So if I see mycelium or mats of fungus, rust spore, something like that, so it's actually the disease organism itself. That's a sign. And hopefully I've put it later in these slides, but if not, I'll cover it more. But some of the characteristic symptoms or signs that we diagnose diseases with are blights, mildews, rots, mosaic. So you can actually see the disease itself. So the sign is actually the structure causing the problem. Or I should say the pathogen structure causing the problem. Okay, so hopefully I've got that later in this slide set. All right, so how do I diagnose a plant disease? First, I have to determine whether the disease is caused by a pathogen or environmental factor. So is it biotic or abiotic? And consider the environmental factors surrounding the plant. And is the actual condition spreading? If it's spreading, it's probably a disease, okay, or a biotic disease. What's the distribution pattern of the damage, and where is it located? Okay, so you're playing CSI of your crop area. You know, did it appear overnight? Did it start and spread and become worse? So compare what you're seeing to a healthy plant, and that would be what you want to look for. Okay, so some of the general types of symptoms that we are going to see on plants would be leaf spots, and spots are going to vary in size from very tiny to large. Usually they're round. I know on some of the grasses, my leaf spots are going to be oval in shape. and you're probably going to get zones of different color or texture to develop, and it's going to look more like a bullseye appearance, and it'll go across leaf veins. So it can be, you know, light in the center and dark ring around it. It could be dark in the center with a lighter ring around it. But you want to look for each, there'll be different symptoms for each different disease. So you want to look at what the exact symptom is. Bacterial leaf spots are going to appear more angular in shape because they're usually limited by small leaf veins. The color of these bacterial leaf spots are usually pretty uniform. And when it first starts out, the tissue kind of looks a little bit water-soaked, but then after it really starts taking hold, it becomes more translucent and papery when it becomes dry. But it looks kind of water-soaked in the beginning. So that would be a bacterial leaf spot. So they're going to be much smaller. Okay, one of the things that we have had a lot of in the past is powdery mildew. It's gotten worse. It occurs on leaves, stems, flowers, and fruits. And one of the biggest concerns that we've had in the past few years has been powdery mildew on the hops production in central Washington, because there have been cultivars that were produced that were extremely susceptible to powdery mildew. And when that happens, you've got a problem. Okay, you lose a lot of crop. So remember that. But it's a grayish white fungal mycelia, and it grows over plant parts, and it can be rubbed off. You're going to see black specks that it can develop into the gray-white powder later on. And usually the tissue under the mycelia is going to stay green while the rest of the tissue will turn yellow on the leaf. But it's going to be, the mildew is going to affect the leaf itself. Okay, and then the other thing that you're going to look for is venochlorosis, and this is going to refer to the bands of yellow tissue along larger leaf veins. Okay, this actually is in contrast to looking at the yellowing between leaf veins, which means it might be nutrient deficiency or herbicide damage. Okay, so this is along the vein instead of between the veins. So if you've got distinct margins, modeling could indicate a nutritional problem. Okay, but if you've got kind of a mosaic patchwork, it could be a viral disease. So you need to look at the symptoms you're looking at. And on page 30, it shows you more what the powdery mildew looks like on the leaf, and then venochlorosis or a mosaic. So you can see the venochlorosis on the left of that picture and the mosaic on the right. Okay, so let's look at some general types of symptoms. We can actually get a shoot dieback, okay, which just means that the growing point is going to gradually die, beginning at the tip. So if there's a line between the affected and healthy bark is sharp, then I would expect an abiotic cause because it stops at a very particular point. Otherwise, shoot dieback can result from, if it's more gradual and cracking, you can suspect some of the winter injury, but you have to look at it as a total, because it can actually be caused by a pathogenic root rot or canker. So look at the whole situation. Okay, if I have top branches dying on trees, this is normally indicative, I'll get it out, of a problem with the roots. If it's sudden, then it's probably a chemical problem. But a branch dying can either be abiotic or biotic, so it can be a pathogen or environmental conditions. If the branches dying are scattered, then you might suspect a canker disease or shoot blight. And if the damage is to one area or one side of the tree, you can suspect weather, but you can also suspect chemicals if they were applied on one side. Because I've had issues with that where the chemical was applied on one lawn and not on the other lawn next door, and that half of the tree had damage. So you want to make sure that you look at all the situations involved with that. Okay, so how a disease spreads, and this is what I actually got out of order here, and this is back on page 27. Disease development occurs through inoculation. So it occurs when the disease organism comes in contact with the plant. And then the causal agent, that should say causal, not casual, it should be CAUSAL, agent of the plant disease, is most vulnerable to chemicals and other unfavorable conditions during this stage of its life cycle because it's just starting, okay? Infection is going to occur if the pathogen is incubating, and it can grow and reproduce in or on the plant, but it's only going to be occurring in susceptible host. And just because a pathogen penetrates the plant doesn't mean that you're going to get a disease developing. You could see the environmental conditions change, or the plant could be resistant to it. Damage resulting from plant disease usually isn't the direct result of feeding by the pathogen. It's more than likely caused to toxins or enzymes produced by the pathogen and other chemicals that the pathogen secretes. And I will go into more of this later, so thank you for your attention, and I will look for a posting of another video online tomorrow. Thanks.